Good morning, lovely listeners. We are joined today by the incredible Claire Shaw, who is a vocal coach extraordinaire, and I'm really excited for you to hear her story. So, Claire, welcome. Tell us a bit about how you became a vocal coach.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me, Bryony. How did I become a vocal coach? Well, I started off as an opera singer many, many moons ago. We're talking 25 years ago now. I was on the trajectory to become a singer, and then something happened in life and my path changed, and I went into lots of development, arts education, and went down a different pathway for quite a long time, but always with voice. Voice has been my life. Somebody described me as the 360 of voice. You've done everything to do with voice. I've led choirs, I've coached children, I've coached people who are 80. And so this role that I have now as a vocal coach, supporting women to find their confidence and ease in speaking in any situation, kind of evolved organically for me. I started a group called Wild Women here in Dorset, where I moved a couple of years ago. And from there, I started to see that women had these boundaries and these blocks to using their voice. Hear that? I'm not really warmed up properly today.
Do we need to do let's do some exercises.
They had these boundaries and their blocks to expressing themselves freely. And I thought, wow, this is fascinating. And I started to dive in. And then I realized that this was universal. And so I wanted to support women who were working in high-powered industries, possibly mostly male-led, to work out how I could help them so that they could rise high and reach for the stars.
And there's something about that, being in the presence of somebody that's been like in a show or is a singer or is somebody that, does theatre. You often feel like you're in the presence of someone who's quite powerful, maybe a leader, but because they can hold a room, right? And that comes from simply their voice. So tell us a bit about how you kind of unlock that then for women specifically.
There was a word there that you used that I'm going to pick up on. You said presence, and it really is about presence. There are some people who are magnetic, aren't they? You walk in, you're like, oh, I'm just drawn to you, and I want to speak to you. I want to hear what you have to say. And a penny can drop and they could say anything, but the whole place is captivated by them. And it's about this presence, which is about being in your body, which is about being very human and open to communication and to giving and receiving from other people. And that's what I help women with. It's about how do we find ourselves in our bodies, because our body is our instrument of communication. How do we connect back into it? Because life gets in the way and there are so many things that take us away from our body. So the first thing I do is, how do we connect back to our body and our breath so that we become really present human beings? And becoming present as a human being again allows us to open up and maybe be more vulnerable than we might have been before. So it's about this presence of self, mind, body and soul, and it has to all align, which is why I essentially call myself more of a holistic vocal coach sometimes. And sometimes that word holistic can send people flying in the opposite direction. But our body is our voice, and we have to think about the whole person when we're doing coaching, because you could have a terrible car journey on the way to a board meeting, and that will completely change how you show up. It can change your presence. You can come up feeling really aggressive and your body can be rigid, and that will affect your vocal cords anyway. But it affects your presence dramatically. Maybe you're less approachable, you're a bit more aggressive. Alternatively, you can show up to something maybe feeling a bit downtrodden and a bit closed in, and then that kind of blocks people from wanting to communicate with you and hear what you've got to say. So we're looking for this in-between state, which is very open and very inviting.
So interesting that anything that you go through can affect your voice, right? And I find it fascinating because we often don't consider that. Mm-hmm. So a lot of women that I meet and coach will come to me and say, I've got imposter syndrome. Yes. I say, okay, well, tell me what happens, what shows up in your body before your brain. Yes. And so you physically can sometimes notice what's going on right before. Yeah. But I think if you are in a professional world, corporate world, and you always have been potentially, you don't often do that work. So they kind of look at me like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's a big hurdle. And it's part of, I suppose it's, for want of a better phrase, educating people about why this is so important to the success of your career, especially for people who need to use their voices all the time. I work with a lot of lawyers and executives and CEOs who are leading. They're not behind typing away, doing some of the brain work that just involves being in their own little cell. They are out there leading people, and they need to be engaging. So I think one of the biggest pieces is getting people to breathe properly. And especially women, we've essentially been conditioned to take up less space. So I work on trying to help women. Let's take it all up. Let's be as expansive as possible and breathe as deeply as possible into our bodies so that we have real power in our communication. And when I say power, I don't mean yelling at somebody or being aggressive. It's kind of that, that kind of energetic power that can really change how you communicate. That open eyes, eye contact really important, body language really important, and just kind of this relaxed state. And all of that then comes through in the warmth of your sound, and people will listen.
And feeling grounded right in that moment.
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
I know who I am and this is what I'm here to say. And that's so interesting that you say about women being conditioned not to take up space, because I often talk about how we hold our breath as well. So day to day, when we're so busy, women typically are the nurturers of the home as well, and the family, and we're rushing, and we might hold that role within the business as well, looking after people. And so we often, our needs come last, and so we hold our breath.
Yeah.
So let's give us some tips. What do we do to kind of notice our breath first?
Shall I do something with you so you can do it?
Yeah, let's go for it.
So as we're sitting down, we'll do something sitting down. And it means that you can do this at work, you can do it in the car, anywhere. I'm trying to make everything so that it can slot into people's busy lives. We are busy already. It's essentially a bit like doing a bit of yoga before you go into a board meeting. So if you sit, Bryony, at the front of your chair, so you've got your sit bones right at the front, there's no slouching, and your feet really grounded. So imagine you've got roots going down into the floor from your feet. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, if that's okay, so you can go in a little bit.
Of course.
Yeah.
Happy to.
And just for now, breathe and notice how your body feels this morning. Are you breathing in the top of your chest? Are you breathing kind of just below the bra line? Or are you breathing way down into your belly?
So I do quite a lot of breath work. So I do tend to focus my breath in my tummy and then up to my ribs and then up to my chest.
Yeah.
So kind of expand all the way up, let them breathe out.
Lovely. What would you say if I just said, can you notice the little gentle rocking motion that you've got happening over your sit bones in the pelvis as you inhale and exhale?
Oh, I've never noticed that before.
It's a really subtle movement, isn't it?
I've never noticed that before. How interesting.
Yeah, and it's happening all the time, but because we don't just come in for a moment and just reflect on what's happening from the inside out. This piece is how I get people to focus in on listening to their body. What's happening today? Are you feeling tense? Are your shoulders up by your ears? If your shoulders are up by your ears, it's going to affect your voice. You can hear how that's changed mine. But if you roll them back, give a roll of your shoulders backwards, maybe put them up to your ears and then drop them down again. How does that feel?
I love that.
How does your whole being feel when you do that?
I'm going to give the listeners a little abbreviation. FOFBOC, feet on floor, bum on chair. I love that one. Because I think sometimes we just need to ground ourselves a little bit, don't we? Like really kind of, and I love the tree root. Visualising tree roots just makes you feel a bit heavier in the chair. Lovely. Move your shoulders.
Move your shoulders. Think about your
floor.
neck. What's happening with your neck? So I start everything with body, breath, and then sound. So if anything, with that pausing for a moment, so check in with our breath and that movement of the pelvis, I then move into kind of a warm up of the shoulders, relaxing the neck, maybe thinking about what's happening in the back. And then from there, really diving into breath. And after that, thinking about how we articulate. What are articulators going on? The p, tick, and making our lips move and thinking what's happening with our tongue. So moving from body to breath to sounding.
I feel like there's so much more for me to learn. So when you're thinking about a person coming into, then I guess this applies whether they're going into a boardroom, whether they're going for a speaking slot, all the same tools and tricks really are going to help them have that presence.
Yes, absolutely. All of these tools. I think there's the mechanics of the voice. There's the how do you prepare a body and a voice for communication on a daily basis. You know, there are like simple things you could do as a 10-minute warm-up. What would that look like if you are in a bigger space? But then there's also the presence piece. So what does that look like? What is presence, and how do we define it within each individual? Because everyone's going to be different and everyone has different comfort levels. So there's two pieces. There's the mechanics of the voice, and then there's the presence of the human being, and how do those interrelate. So that's what I work with.
And so you must have seen some really interesting examples of how people are kind of not using their voice in that way, or not using it in a way that kind of shows up in the way that they want it to, potentially. Tell us about that.
So one of the most recent ones that people I've been working with, they're a partner in a law firm and really versed, expert in her field, but she has noticed that around a table where there are lots of men, or in a courtroom where her opponent is a man, she feels inferior, and she feels that her voice isn't as authoritative and commanding, and it started to shake and wobble, and she's noticed that the nerves come in, she comes off her body, and she loses physical vocal power. And as a result, her presence diminishes. So in setting up the voice and the mechanics in a way that makes you feel really confident in how you present yourself, we've been working together on her big speeches that she's been having, to really articulate with clarity and confidence what she has to say. In a way, she used the word, I want to be as authoritative as a man. And I was like, what would it mean if you were as authoritative as a woman in the courtroom? What is in our feminine communication power that a man doesn't have, which is actually, in my opinion, more engaging? You know, we have very different qualities, and it doesn't mean that one person, a man, is lesser than a woman in a situation, but we are different, both physiologically, and the way we show up in communication and how we lead is different. And I'm sure you've come across this too, Bryony, haven't you? How a woman leads and how a man leads can be very, very different. So how do we check in with
different.
our female power? Yeah, exactly. Our female power, as opposed to trying to fit into this patriarchal mold that we feel we need to fit into in order to lead with authority and power. So that's what she and I have been working on, finding her voice, really grounding down. She realised that she was only breathing in the top half of her body, and as a result, everything was coming up high. She was coming up off her voice, and it was cracking. When you're nervous, this is what happens. The shoulders rise, don't they? But if you can bring them down, breathe low, really have conviction and practice what is coming out of your mouth, as opposed to just rolling it round in the head a number of times. Articulate it, feel the sound. And that's what she's been like, gesticulating, throwing arms around. And that's not to say we're going to do that in the courtroom, but that's how we practice. And it's a craft. And I believe that people need to take time to hone this craft. And it's overlooked as a soft skill in careers.
Absolutely agree with that, because I used to work on the path to partner programs, and I do quite a lot of leadership programs now, and it isn't something that's included. And I often say, shall we talk about communication? Because if you miss out the way that somebody feels, speaks, you know, how they breathe, then you aren't actually equipping them to go into a space where they are a leader, because ultimately they need to feel in that moment that they can use their voice in a way that feels good, but also it's unique to each of us, isn't it? It's not the same for everybody.
No. It's like a fingerprint. Your voice is as unique as your fingerprint. And did you know, I think you and I discussed this once before, somebody makes an opinion and a decision about who you are in 0.2 seconds of hearing you. They don't even have to see your face. Just by hearing your voice, they've made a decision about who you are and how you lead. So if the statistics are showing us that, the question is, why do we not put more effort into this? Why is it not a bigger part of our professional growth?
Yeah, and I'm seeing more of it now, because there is obviously a growing movement of female founders, a lot more of a spotlight on where we get our funding from. There's obviously the conversation around how men and women pitch differently, how men receive more funding because of the way that they pitch, what they put out there, how they pitch themselves. And so there's probably argument to say that it's also around that pitching conversation and knowing in that moment how to be powerful and be grounded and know thyself, essentially, but also have that toolkit. Like anything else that you would do, you would have practiced, you would know what you want to sharpen before you go into that space. So tell us a bit about how you work with people then, Claire.
I work in a variety of different ways. Some people come to me I'm literally their called upon coach. And so whenever they've got a big public speaking engagement or a presentation, they just call me up and we'll have a few sessions. And they're my ongoing clients, and they're people who I've worked with already, and we've laid a foundation for how we work together. And then other people I'll do sort of a big chunk of sort of 3 to 4 months work together to really find their voice. Somebody said to me recently, she said, I don't even think I know what my voice is anymore, who I am anymore. It's very therapeutic as well. Our voice is so emotive and it's so part of who we are. So I work long term and deep, or as and when people need me. So the work does lend itself to short, sharp. We need a little bit of work on a presentation, or I'm having trouble with this part of my voice, and I will essentially diagnose. I'll do kind of like an SOS, what's happening with the voice, a diagnostic, and then I'll give people exercises and we'll work together to get them back on track. So that they're using healthy vocal techniques and not getting tired at the end of the day. A lot of people get tired if they use their voices. Does that answer your question clearly? I think I went all over the shop just now.
Yeah, absolutely. And while you were talking, I was thinking also about how we often talk about women showing up and using their voice in a space full of men. Do you also get men that come to you and say, I don't feel good about, how I'm showing up in that space?
Yeah, I think people come to me, do you work with men as well? And I absolutely do. I am discerning about who I work with.
I get that sometimes.
But I think that the more men who are aware about how they are communicating, the better the workplace. The more men and women are aware and working in collaboration with just healthy communication, better the work environment can be. You can't have one without the other, I don't think, especially when it comes to the point of judging a woman more fiercely about how they sound than you ever would a man. Like, have you ever heard of a man say that they speak too high in a review?
Yeah, no.
Exactly. Like, what are you going to do with that? Your voice is too high.
I'm not sure I'm not sure I've actually ever come across a man that's even reviewed their voice. I've definitely known men that have said, I feel a bit nervous about presenting to the room, or, I really need to prep, or whatever it is. But I don't think I've ever heard a man criticize or be concerned or, critique their own voice. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I've heard a lot of women question how they pitch, but that's very typical. There's a Reshma Sajani TED talk around coding. I think they did an experiment with boys and girls, and the boys would just give it a go, and the girls would be removing it and trying again until they got it right. And I think that's also quite, it's a bit of a stereotype, but it's typically, statistically speaking, that's how we operate. Girls try to get it right, and boys will, be brave and just try something. And that's all part of our conditioning and programming, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's so also the conversations. I'm working a lot with the mechanics of the voice, but it's also about the messaging and about the language that you're using. You get to a certain point and the language that you were using that got you to where you are now is not going to serve you higher up. Not apologizing for taking up space, not apologizing to having an opinion. Those phrases that women often use. I do it as well. Oh, I'm really sorry. I've just got one quick thing to say, not going to take long, as opposed to, hey, I have something to say and I'm going to take up that minute that needs to be taken up because this is important. So what language are we using? How are we expressing our ideas in a succinct way so that we get straight to our point? That is it the Francis Fry triangle, where get your point in at the very top and then do the detail, because you're guaranteed you're going to get cut off somewhere along the way.
Or you'll just lose people because you're covering the detail. I actually thought about this yesterday in a coffee shop, and I saw a guy lean over the counter to the girl behind the counter. He just said, "Sorry, can I get some milk?" And I thought, why? We do apologise generally quite a lot, don't we?
Yes,
men and women. We apologise for what we need or what we're doing, and actually we don't ask or state exactly what we need or what we're doing in the moment. We kind of tend to fluff around it a bit. I don't know if that's a very British thing. Do you see it's different depending on
it's
who
very
you
English,
coach?
I think. I work with a lot of people in America, and they don't suffer that. What did Stephen Fry say? Stephen Fry said, I really must stop saying sorry. It doesn't help me or anybody else. He started his memoir with that sentence, and I just thought that was classic.
Yeah. we're deeply apologetic just for existing a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So if you're coaching someone
Yeah.
perhaps feeling a little bit less confident, I often see people that say, I know that there's certain people been there for a while, know what they're doing, and I've got a little bit of nerves around it. What's your sort of 3 top tips for someone going into that space?
Get in your body and out of your head would be the first thing. We can spiral around and round and round and round. But if you can find something that suits you, maybe yoga or a run, or just physically doing some breathing like I was doing, some really simple stretches. So getting it into your body and out of your head would be my first top tip. The second one would be to, if it's where you're having to present something or it's the first time you're introducing yourself, think about how you would like to introduce yourself. I think we take for granted that we know how to introduce ourselves. And some of the first work I do with people is, who are you? And what's the one thing you want that room to go away knowing about you, and get it out. Because once you start getting it out of your mouth and saying it out loud, you might be like, oh, that doesn't feel right. I didn't mean that. I don't like that. So testing that out into your body, speaking it out loud, and then thinking about your presence, really playing around before you go into how you hold yourself and bring awareness to that. This idea of from the inside out is a lot of this work. How are you walking? How are you sitting? Are you slumped in your chair? What does that say? Are you really forward and aggressive because you want to prove yourself? And what does that show? Or are you able to just be here, be in the moment, and show that you're present and that you're listening? I think that's really important. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So as much as my work is about communication, it's also about noting how we interact on a human to human level. Movement.
I love those takeaways. Get into your body and out of your head. Amazing. Yeah. I think we could use that all the time. Yeah, that's a goodie.
So at the moment, with the getting into your body and out of your head, I'd encourage somebody on a board, don't wear any spandex. Make sure you got a stretchy waistband, so you can breathe, because otherwise you get all tense up and then you can't breathe. So thinking about being comfortable as well as professional. There are things that we can wear to still feel professional that don't involve spandex and very high heels.
A friend of mine said recently she does a lot of speaking slots. She wears trainers all the time now, and they're smart trainers, so they look nice.
Yeah.
But it just helps her stand strong when she's speaking to a big room full of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone I know who teaches what I do teaches in trainers, and I often don't have any shoes on at all, if I'm brutally honest. But then I wear those bare feet shoes, and I'm not suggesting that everyone needs to change their wardrobe, but just considering what you're wearing and how that affects your body, because that's going to affect how you stand, how you breathe, and how you speak.
Dang. Oof. So Claire, with all this work that you do, which is actually quite emotive, what do you do to take care of yourself?
I like that question. Well, this morning I went for a run. I dropped my small human at school, and I take to the hills. I get out in nature. That's how I look after my mental health and my body. And then I practice what I preach with my work. I do a lot of Feldenkrais work, which is very subtle movements. So daily practice it's kind of a mixture between yoga, Pilates, and meditation for the body. So I do that. And I meditate. I'm a meditator. What do you do? I'm so interested in what other people do.
What do I do?
Yeah, what do you do?
Well, I lift. I absolutely love lifting weights. It makes me feel really strong.
Yeah.
I do quite a lot of breath work. So especially if I'm feeling a bit rushed or stressed, I do tend to kind of just sit and breathe slowly for not for very long, really, just for a few seconds, just to kind of reground myself.
Yeah.
And I love being outside. So I'm really lucky that I've got a little office at the bottom of the garden. So I watch the squirrels, and there's some really big fat furry foxes in our garden. But being outside is, I'm a big fan of being outside. Being by the sea, anywhere that's got some open, expansive space is just delicious for clearing the cobwebs, I think, from our brains sometimes, because we are continuously switched on. And I do think that we are currently in a space where we are continuously comparing ourselves as well. And I just think comparison is not only the thief of joy, it's the thief of confidence.
Yes.
It stops us from kind of feeling good about what we're doing because we're so busy looking at what everybody else is doing. And there's a place for it, 100%. But I think, just taking that space for yourself, it can be really helpful, can't it? Instead of looking at everyone else, just giving yourself some space to breathe and remember what value you already have.
you'll show up better. If you've got something really important on Monday, make sure your Sunday is restorative, you're recharging, that you're ready to be present for somebody else because you've nurtured yourself. I think it's really an important part of the craft of leadership, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, when we're rushed and busy and we haven't made space for ourselves, we are going to make quick decisions. And that's the other like hot tip that often says slow your decision making down, just see if it feels good in your body. I'm going to be using get out of your head and into your body all the time now.
Yeah, do it. Because I think we need to be slower, I think, in order to process. And this work will encourage you to slow down and look inside. And that can be scary, but I think in the long run, it's really beneficial.
Slow down to speed up. Claire, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. So you heard it here first, folks. This is the lovely Claire Shaw, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Bryony. Have a lovely morning.